I'm going to just say a little bit about residential schools. Gertie went to one from a very early age and was, as I said, the first high school graduate from Muscagonish. And she would talk about residential schools and about kids she knew there. She would talk about how they would sneak down to the kitchen at night and snitch food, learning to negotiate the rules. She would talk about abuse. The residential school that she went to did not, as far as we know, have problems with sexual abuse. But the abuse that she felt was that she had been abandoned by her parents. Now, her parents were very, very nice people. It was a large family. The chief knew which way the winds were blowing. His kids needed to have an education. Gertie's older brother, Charlie, was taken out of the school in Waskaganish, run by the missionary, who said, "I don't have children just to supply your school. I need him to come and help me in the bush." Out Charlie went. With Gertie, it was different. But Gertie would have dreams at night about going to the aircraft at the dock. Her parents would get on the aircraft and leave her behind. Abandonment kind of thing. The other abuse that she recalled was those tough girls from Mistissini. Okay, Cree girls, different community. So it's a complicated one. But when the school situation became problematic was when a delegation came from Quebec City and went around and talked to some families there through an interpreter about whether their children should be taught in French. And parents would say, yes, good. And then a group came, they must have heard about the one from Quebec City, a group came from Toronto, and they went round with an interpreter. And people said, yes, they should learn English. And those two groups both wound up with schools. The priest there wound up with a Catholic school, all for about 150 kids. The delegation from Quebec City, the delegation from Toronto, and the priest, none of them went through the chief and council. There was a very well-functioning chief and council. They were ignored. That was, to my mind, outrageous. I wrote a paper about it. I sent it to Indian Affairs in Ottawa, got a nice letter back. I sent it to the Anglican bishop, put it in his magazine. I sent it to the Catholic bishop, who did not reply. And that was my first entry into what we call applied anthropology. Anthropology being made use of in some way, bringing a perspective that can inform a situation in a useful way. That's what I mean by applied. It doesn't mean at the barricades with a gun. I know how to use guns, okay? I don't do that. Okay, this is different. This is understanding, increasing the understanding of a situation so that people of reasonably goodwill can avoid mistakes. Okay, I did quite a lot of that over the years, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I eventually got a medal from the Canadian Anthropology Society, and the Weaver Tremblay Medal in applied anthropology, which was a bit of a heady experience. I'm not inclined to blow my own bugle, in spite of the fact that I'm doing all of this now. And it gave me a chance to have a kick at the can and chastise people about methodology and that kind of thing. Yeah, that was a good experience. But it all began with that schmozzle of educational administration. And when the James Bay Agreement was being written, I was asked to be on a committee there having to do with education. And one of the things I did was to have a look at what was really working well in community administrations. The band manager job was. So I came up with the idea of a community education administrator, patterned on the band manager thing. And that's what Gertie did with her adult life. Gave her a salary, gave her quite a significant say in what went on and the relations between teaching staff, parents, kids, and so on. That was applied anthropology. I'm proud of that. It's one of the sections in the James Bay Agreement. And then when John Murdoch started his Cree thing, that was another case of applied anthropology, where it was applying stories. I had been chastised by more politically activist anthropologists for having frittered away my time just collecting old stories. At that time, it was called butterfly collecting. You take some old thing and you pin it to a board because it's dead. Okay? No, the stories are living, not dead. Okay, still. So, yeah, I also was asked to be kind of an expert witness in the trial of a woman from another Cree community who had killed her infant. And as it happens, I knew the husband and admired him. His wife had a serious psychotic episode and was let down by rather hard parents, not residential school graduates, just hard parents. And she had intended to kill herself, but instead killed her infant. They wanted to charge her with infanticide, which is a rarely used charge. And she said, "No, I'm guilty. I did it." But they persuaded her to go for infanticide, reduced sentence kind of thing, and I was asked to come and testify at the sentencing hearing, where I explained that this woman was living in a non-native town where she did not have the support of her parents and was rather isolated from the native community because of her temperament. And her husband was away a lot because he was a politician, going to meetings and so on. And so I explained this to the judge, and his conclusion was that he did not believe that she was in any way a danger to society. He saw no point in having her go to jail, and so she was sentenced to go so many hours a week to the Native Friendship Center in that town and to weekly see a psychiatrist. Her husband was sitting behind me when I wasn't up making my testimony. He leaned forward and he said, "Thank you very much." And when I went out, here she was sitting out in the lobby, not looking happy. And I said, "I wish you luck." Well, she got pregnant again. She had a baby. She went to the bush with her parents. She gave her baby to her parents. Very bad sign. She was not being a success as a mother. She told them that she was going to go out and hunt rabbits. She took a 30-30 and killed herself. We thought we had done something very liberal and good, getting her off and so on. She was carrying the guilt. We did not see it from her point of view. That was a mistake. You're going to be an applied anthropologist, see it from the other person's point of view. Understand what you're doing before you do it. That's the mission for applied anthropology, I think. Okay, I went too long on that one. Okay, yeah, a few other applied things for other First Nations, basically being an expert witness or an external on somebody's dissertation for other northern native communities. And then my post-retirement pride and joy is that the Moose Cree have a lot of dams built on their territory, beginning in the 1920s, ending in the 1960s. And I was employed by a research coordinator that they hired to assist in assessing the long-term damages of flooding and the dams in the Moose River Basin, very large area. And I did that along with a colleague, Vic Burkus from the University of Manitoba. And we assessed what the cumulative effects were and had a little meeting at which Hydro said, well, that's totally out of the question. And then after a few years, they wanted to enlarge their generating stations. And as part of the environmental assessment requirements, which was a law passed in Ontario when the Ray government was there, and a very good law indeed, they had to settle past grievances. Unbeknownst to me, they offered the Moose Cree $200 million. A lot of money. And the Moose Cree leadership response, residential school graduates, was rather than have the cash and dole it out individually, we'd like to buy 15% of your profits for 50 years so that we have an economic base for the young people who are coming up now to have something to go with. Very wise decision. Very community-oriented. Another one of the things that they got, besides the 15%, was underwriting a history of the Moose River Basin so that the kids now being raised in towns could understand where their heritage came from. And so I was approached by a fellow that I knew, Stan Ludet, asking me if I would write the book. I said, hey, I'm in my 80s. I've got other stuff I want to do. I wouldn't mind being an editor. And Stan and 3 other Moose Crees were all part of the environmental working group that was monitoring what was going on in the basin by Hydro. And with some other people, we started a history of the people of the Moose River Basin. Well, writing a book by committee is not fast, and we're moving into year 5 now, but we think we're going to be done in a matter of a few months, okay? It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. We have written, I believe, a good book. It's a bit too long at the moment. We're going to have to cut it down, but we still got a couple of things we got to plug into it, too. Along about last April, we had a face-to-face meeting in Timmins, and I flew up, and it really took the starch out of me. And so I mentioned that I thought that I wouldn't be able to make these trips anymore. And Stan's response was, well, we'll come to your place. Well, in May was when my chemo started. They diagnosed why it was that the starch had gone out of me. It was lymphoma. And we had our first meeting here a couple of months ago. We had a great time. Betty couldn't believe that we did anything because we were always laughing. Now, there's a lesson in that. If people aren't good-humored, there's something wrong with the situation. We did great. We got a lot done. We got a lot of people saying, okay, well, I can do that, and so on. And they're coming back December 8th and 9th, and Stan said he'd cook a turkey, okay? So the book has moved south in its face-to-face project. It's a friendly relationship. It is a collaborative relationship, truth and reconciliation, okay? So yeah, we're going to talk about people who were uprooted and forced off the land by the construction of hydro dams. But we're going to talk about a good deal more. And these chapters are not just by Native people. We have a chapter by a hydro guy who explains why, as a result of the mandate that they got to level the playing field, the Crees have input now, environmental monitoring. If they find something they don't like, they say so, and the thing is modified, and so on. That used to not happen. The area was considered to be uninhabited. Okay, so that's something that I've been able to continue on and enjoyed hugely, contributed to, but not writing anymore. Then it seemed like there was nobody else to write it, because this has got to be a history of the people of the Moose River Basin by people of the Moose River Basin, native and non-native. And I like that very much. And we got advice from a panel of elders fairly early on, and former chief at New Post, Peter Archibald, said, don't put limits on this. Don't put boundaries on the ground, because people can move wherever they want to. They respect other people's locations and activities, but they're not prohibited. That's a government thing. Boundaries around territories, a government thing. So don't go that way. Don't put boundaries about it in time. There isn't a cutoff. This is going to go on. We have a future out there. Don't give people the impression, well, this is all gone now. So we have no boundaries. And the final chapter, at Stan's suggestion, is the next chapter will be yours. So pass it on. So anyway, that's been a very satisfying experience too. I was really lucky to go where I did, when I did, and get to know the people that I got to know, because very little of this was strategic planning on my part. But finding an opportunity and then responding to it.